Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of The Experience Maker. This is your host, Dan Gingiss, customer experience speaker and consultant, and now virtual trainer in the day and age that we live in today. And I'm so excited to have on the show today a friend of mine who is one of the most entertaining people that I know. So I know this is going to be a really fun discussion. He is also a keynote speaker and the communications manager at University of California at Irvine, and has a new book out that we'll see if you can figure out the name. Ryan Foland. Ryan, how you doing, man?
Ahoy, buddy! It's great to be here. I'm excited. I'm looking on the bright side of life.
That is for sure. Why don't we start before we even get into you? Tell us what's on your head.
What? This is the name of my book, Ditch the Act, and it's interesting because it came out in October. But it's so exciting to see so many people ditching the act right now in the middle of this pandemic. And ditching the act, at the end of the day, if you look at the back of the book, it says, be human. And at the end of the day, I believe that society and culturally, we've gotten to this place where we have multiple personalities. You might be different in front of your boss. You might be different in front of your coworkers. You might be different in front of your family. You might be different in front of your friends. And people are put in the loony bin for less personalities than that. Yet we manage all these different profiles, and we tend to think that what people want to see is our success. But at the end of the day, people actually don't care about your story of success. They care about how they see themselves in your story. And we've all shared failures. We've all shared the trials and tribulations to get where we are. And when you start to be vulnerable and have the courage to share what's really going on, AKA ditch the act, that's when people actually get to know you. And if they get to know you, then they might like you. And if they decide to like you, then they can trust you. And over time, that leads to loyalty. I think that now more than ever, it's important to have the confidence and the skills and the how-to really put your authentic self out there, knowing that the more real you are, the more people can connect with you. So I think gone are the days of the highlight reel, REEL. And I think now is more time than ever to really establish, build, produce, and continuously share your highlight REAL, being human.
Oh, I see what you did there. I like that with the different spelling, the REAL. You know, one of the things that Ditch the Act reminds me of, and tell me if I'm on the right track here. For years, really since I got out of college, which is frankly many years ago.
A couple years ago, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just last week. I have reviewed people's resumes, and I do it just as it's not a service that I sell or anything. I just do it because people ask me, and I was an editor at the newspaper in college, so I'm just pretty good at spotting this kind of thing. Plus, I've been a hiring manager, so I know resumes very, very well. One of the things that I always recommend to people, and that I started doing the minute I got out of college, was making sure that there was something in my resume that was about me that wasn't about work. And so, for example, the two things that I had when I first got out of college were, number one, that I was a certified bartender, which was true. I had gone to bartending school and gotten a little certificate. I could prove it. And the second at the time was that I was a big fan of The Simpsons. Now, neither one said anything about the work that I could do or my job experience or whatever. But what was amazing to me was almost every interview I went on, the first question started with either a drink question or a Simpsons question, which to me, I think is kind of what you're saying, is like, that's the part of me that was real. It wasn't just the, I've done these jobs and here's my accomplishments and here's all what I went to school and blah, blah, blah. It was like, tell me something about the guy I'm going to be sitting next to at work every day.
Yeah, so that's definitely in line with what we talk about, but I'm going to take it one step further, which I think people are scared to do. You talk about a resume, which is great. In the book, one of the secret sauces that we share with the world is what we call an exposure resume. Okay? In your resume, you're told this is your highlight, REEL. This is all the good stuff, all the buzzy words, all of your experience, your percentage over this, and like all of the stuff that you want to showcase. And what you don't do is you don't put the time you got fired. You don't put the time that your startup failed. You don't put the time that you were divorced. You don't put the time that your kid got cancer. You don't put these things on your resume. But we have an exposure resume, which basically helps you tease out these things that either you don't feel like you're proud of, or you're convinced that everybody would judge you about, or even middle range stuff that like you're just hoping nobody finds out. But the reality is that your expertise is rooted in your experience, both the good and the bad. And in fact, usually the learning lessons come from when things go really wrong. And we all are learning a lot right now in real time because things are going wrong. So the exposure resume helps to tease out what hasn't gone right. Then you, for each of those stories, you say, what did I learn as a result of that? And then what skills did I acquire as a result of that? So now when somebody asks you a question on your resume because you say that you have a skill of problem solving, when they ask you that question, want to learn more, instead of saying, well, here's all the ways I solve problems, you say, well, it actually was my sophomore year in college when this happened. And I started to look at things totally differently because I was in the situation. Now you're going to relate to that person who you're talking with on a level where they haven't had a good experience, but you own your whole story. It establishes your expertise based on your experience. So it's a way of reverse engineering the skills that you have based on not necessarily what you're good at, but what you've learned by things that have gone wrong. And again, it ties into where you're going to get people more interested when they see themselves in your story, as opposed to just saying, I'm awesome. So it's the opposite of a resume that you tease out, and we put them in what we call your exposure bank. And you can now start to identify these stories in your past that you can use as relatability tools to meet people with where they're at and really help not show that you're better than them, but in fact, you're more like them than they actually thought.
Yeah, I like the idea of being vulnerable and sort of showing the human side, which again, to your point, I think is something that is becoming really important right now. We're all, in a lot of ways, we're all getting to know each other a lot better than we did before. Now that we're all forced to be at home and talk to our computers and interact that way. So let's back up, Ryan, because I didn't get to say this at the beginning. Yes, good job. I'll do the same thing. Tell us a little bit about Ryan Foland, and how did you get to this place where you're preaching to people to ditch the act?
Well, it's because I didn't really find, to give you the end, the good part, the final of the story is that I didn't really start to see traction with my brand until I started to ditch the act. And the reality is that there are a lot of people who are now realizing how important it is to have a personal brand, to own your space online, to have a digital footprint that you're proud of. And I think a month ago, maybe there was still a lot of skepticism. But now when we're in a remote environment, at least testing out the waters, I think people are seeing the importance of new forms of communication. You can go search, how do I build a personal brand online? And you will get inundated with all of the information that you need. You can even then start to follow all of these experts' advice, and you can do the right stuff and still get no traction. And that's exactly what I did. There was a certain moment, like my inciting incident, I thought I was going to get fired at UCI. And I had been there initially to run their entrepreneurship center, but I ran this center like it was a startup. And so I really pushed the limits, did not ask for any permission, but I had to get a lot of forgiveness. And at a certain point, I was convinced that I was being called into my boss's office to get fired. And in that moment, I'm like, again, I'm going to have to reinvent myself, right? Like I have to now not be known as the guy who's at UC Irvine, but now I've got to reposition and rebrand myself. And I thought to myself, no, I'm the same person that continues to go up and down in this roller coaster, but I've always hidden behind like, hey, Ryan, what do you do? Oh, I work at UCI. Hey, Ryan, what do you do? Oh, I've got this great startup that I'm doing. Hey, Ryan, what do you do? It never was, I'm Ryan. Oh, I happen to work at UCI. Oh, I also speak. And so I realized the importance of that personally. This was in 2015 or so. And at that moment, I'm like, that's it. No matter what, from now on, it's got to be me first. And then I work at this place. And for me, that was a personal brand. So it's putting my person in front. And so I ended up not getting fired, which was ironic. They actually created a new position because I was creating such a good type of disruption on campus. But I had already made the decision to build my brand. So I did what most people do. I went online and I searched for expert advice. I started writing blogs. I wrote 50 blogs over the summertime. I was on my sailboat, like sailing home, dictating different thoughts about what I thought people would be interested in. I offered my speaking services to anyone and everyone. I was like, I'll be your host, I'll be your MC, I'll be your keynote, whatever you want. I'm your guy. Dressed the part, got the haircut, slick, everything. And I'm like, social media, let me figure this out. I'm speaking here, or I'm trying to do this, or check out my blog. And I got zero traction, like zero, because what I realized in retrospect is that I was just another talking head that said that he was a speaker, that wasn't really speaking, that had articles that no one was interested in. And it's not that I was doing the wrong things, I was doing the right things. And I was serendipitously invited to Keith Ferrazzi's house for an entrepreneurial bash. And Keith Ferrazzi wrote 2 amazing books, just came out with a 3rd one. You should check out Never Eat Alone, which is one of the historically best networking books out there. And Keith actually wrote the foreword in our book, which is really exciting. He wrote Who's Got Your Back? And he has a new one called Co-Elevation. So he brought these entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs from all around the world, and he brought us into a room in one of he has an awesome house in the Hollywood Hills. So it's like starstruck. And he said, okay, everybody put your phones away. I'm going to share something with you. So for me, I had read his books and I looked up to him as like an icon of networking. He's actually known as the godfather of networking, not to be confused with Shep, the godfather of customer service. And he proceeded to share something that was very vulnerable, something that was happening in his life that we would have never thought that this guy had anything wrong with him. And all of us were like, oh, damn, did he just share that with us? And instantly there was a certain amount of trust that we knew he had in us by the fact that he shared the information. So we all split up into different tables and you got a random number on the bottom of your plate. And he said, when you go to dinner tonight at my house here in the different areas, instead of introducing yourself and saying all of the things that are going right, I challenge you. In fact, there's a moderator at each table to make sure it happen. You need to introduce yourself with what's going wrong personally and professionally. You're here, you have a certain amount of success. But when you meet somebody new, I want you to share what's going wrong. And what that does is it lets other people see how they can help you out. So I was a Toastmaster at the time, still am proudly. So I stood up, the only person that stood up. I'm like, hi, my name's Ryan Foland, and I want to be a speaker, but nobody wants to hire me. Nobody's reading my blogs. I can't figure out this whole social media thing, and it's really frustrating me. Everybody went around. Somebody else stood up and said, I've got 10 million reads on my content. Everybody wants me to speak, but I'm not comfortable speaking. And my girlfriend just broke up with me, sat down. And, all these other people. But that one person, I was like, wait a minute. Maybe I could help him out. So afterwards, I said, hey, I'm Ryan. I can help you if you can help me. And he's like, okay. I said, you help me figure out this whole social media and writing and branding, and I'll help you with your confidence and your speaking and put a little charisma in your step, right? Because that's my strength. So we shook hands, and his name is Leonard Kim. And fast forward a few years, he was the one who really helped me understand I was doing everything right, but in the wrong order. I was writing, but I had I didn't have a bio that really showed who I was. So if you found my article, you couldn't find out about me because I had this veil. I had this act that I was putting on of this is what I think a speaker should be like. And so as soon as I started to incorporate a bit of vulnerability into my content, into my storytelling, into my speeches, into just my general outreach, not only did I feel a lot more comfortable being a ginger in my own freckles, but I started to get traction and I let people get to know me. And if you read my bio, it shares not just the good, but the bad and the ugly. And I've had some bad things happen to me, as we all have. But as soon as I was able to own that, then people started to see me not as just another fake speaker, but as somebody who had a message that they're excited about. And so my core message, what I speak about, if you boil it down, is simplicity in messaging and simply being you. And I've got this 313 method that I love speaking all over the place as far as I can spread it. I've got my 313 podcast. It's called the 313 Challenge. And I've got a World of Speakers podcast, which you've been a guest on a couple of times. So for me, we decided, Leonard and I decided what we had worked so well because we worked with, pretty top-notch executive level people. And we'd say, we won't work with you unless you're willing to share your underbelly, unless you're willing to become human. And we had to turn a lot of people away. Now, since writing the book and it coming out, and with the world changing, Leonard and I have gone in separate directions. I'm more focused on spreading my message through keynoting and workshops and digital things like that. He's more interested in the agency model as well. So I have a lot of respect for him. But at the end of the day, the book even gave me the confidence and the strength to really stand up and be like, no, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to go. You know, not who's coming with me, but I don't care who's coming with me, because this is just who I am. So it's in the book, we share our stories to show you by example. And then we share with you why it's important to ditch the act. And then we share with you how to ditch the act. So it's full of worksheets and all kinds of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's a lesson in not taking yourself as seriously and letting people actually get to know you so they like you, trust you, and ultimately are loyal to your content and your message.
Well, I also want to add that in my podcast Experience This, we did do a segment on Ditch the Act. And one of the things that my co-host Joey Coleman and I did was try to follow your lead and ditch the act ourselves and talk a little bit about things that were going on in our lives that maybe weren't, as hunky-dory as everybody makes it seem. Although what's interesting is that particular show, and actually my personal brand, has been intentionally about the positive. So I talk about customer experience. My feeling early on was there's lots of people that kind of crap on the companies that are screwing it up. And when companies screw it up, we all know it because it goes viral in social media. So I didn't really want to be that guy that poured onto that. I instead wanted to find good examples that we can all learn from and be inspired by. So my question to you is, understanding the kind of the old idiom that misery loves company, help me understand how I get the vulnerability, I get the being real, but how do we not turn that dinner that you just mentioned into like a sob fest, right? Like, how do we pick each other up then and come back to the positive?
Yeah, so it's all about context and not oversharing. And also it's about not sharing in the moment. Okay, so let me go through those all together. When it's context, you're not just saying, oh, I'm not feeling bad for the sake of not feeling bad and for trying to gain other misery in your company and your misery. It's really about taking what hasn't gone wrong or what has gone wrong and sharing what you've learned as a result of that through that process. So one example, over the Christmas holiday, there was a boat parade my parents have been involved with for 37 years. And to take a long story short, my dad almost died on Saturday night, and we had to rush him to the hospital, and it was really stressful. And the next day, the parade had to go on. So Sin and I took the boat, and we finished the parade without my parents for the first time in 37 years. It was a very emotional time, and it was very scary, but I wasn't tweeting about it in real time. I wasn't saying, my dad's going to die, because if you do that, it's actually unfair to your followers, because they're caught up in the middle of it. They're like, is he going to die? It took me a couple of weeks, and then I simply shared about how difficult the last couple of weeks were. And then people who knew what was happening with me were able to be there and understand what was going on. So when you're sharing in the moment, you're not sharing the full story. And I love this concept. A story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if you're sharing your story without there being some sort of resolution, you're kind of holding your followers hostage for what's happening, and they're going to be curious about it. This question that you ask, I think, is one of the roots of the challenges of showcasing your authenticity in a way that you're vulnerable, but without doing it for the sake of being vulnerable to get more people to join your misery.
Yeah.
And we talk about 5 levels of exposure. And so this is a really interesting concept. And what might be one for you to try, and for people listening, that no one sees, that everybody does, like losing your keys, being exhausted, snoozing on your alarm, losing your water bottle, spilling something on yourself, your coffee being forgotten in the microwave that you left 30 minutes ago because you just wanted to heat it up. All these little things, the fumbles that happen on the daily, those are easy things for people to relate to. And it's not like, oh, woe is me, misery. some of, if not the most engaged tweets that I have are level 1 exposures, where I'm just sharing something stupid that I did that I wouldn't think to share, but everybody else relates to it to some extent, and then they chirp in and they give their 2 cents on it. So level 1 is real low level stuff, like internet bandwidth as a result of your daughter having piano lessons and that being like a reality. And now so many people can relate with it.
Yeah.
Once you start to do that, you'll see people are receptive, and now they're getting to know you a little bit. Then level 2 is sharing challenges that you have with other people or relationships, because we've all had challenges in relationships and with other people. And so you're not throwing anyone under the bus. You're not calling out people by names, but you're sharing the challenges that you have with other people. Level 3 maybe is a little bit more serious. Maybe it's a business failure. Maybe it's even coming out. Maybe it's something to do with, letting people know that you've been going through a challenge in a relationship, like a divorce or something. Level 4 is these bigger failures, like things that you've gotten in trouble for, or maybe it's a DUI that you've never shared, or maybe it's a failed business. And you can't just jump to level 4, because then people might think that you're emotionally throwing up on them. But if you incorporate a few of these along the way, you end up getting everything that anyone could hold against you out there, and it becomes part of who you are. I was involved with a business partner. We had a successful business. I found out that there were some things that were happening I was not aware of, and I left the company in the middle of the night and thought I had a clean break. 5, 6, 7 years later, got dragged back into a full-on investigation with the FTC, and it was the scariest, the most uncertain, the craziest time of my life. And for fear of everything, I wanted no one to know about it. But every time that you'd search for me, you would see it. And so that's a level 4. And it took me going through these different levels of unpeeling my ginger onion to get comfortable to put it out there. And now that's a staple of who I am, is going through that, being on the other side, knowing what I've learned from it. I speak from experience now, and I'm able to take that, what was before something I'd be so fearful of people knowing about, and that's something that I have that's in my arsenal, that like I'm proud of what I've learned from that situation. So
I love it.
It's this little progressive that you can share. So it's not like one or all. It's a lifestyle at the end of the day. If you share how you're feeling along the way, you're not going to surprise anybody by just all of a sudden like blowing up and being miserable or something.
Yeah, I love that. It's almost like, come along with me on the ride, and
Yes.
the ride's going to have some ups and downs, and we'll share it all as we go. So we only have a few minutes left. I do want to I want to shift gears for just a moment. I notice in the background one of your classic stick figures, and we're actually going to put one up on the screen right now, which is one that I use in my keynotes all the time. It's the leaky bucket. And
Yes.
And I always credit you. Your name is on it, but I always put a credit on there. And that's this is the you can tell that this is clearly me, because it's a handsome bald guy, obviously. And and it talks about the fact that that all companies have a leaky bucket, that there's customers that are walking out the door while we're focused on bringing in new ones. But there's the handsome bald guy with his net, catching those customers out of the bucket. I just love it. And so not only did I want to tell you that I constantly use this and credit you, but I wanted to ask you, how did the stick figure drawing come into your life? And I know that you share lots of your stick figures on social, and please share with us the one that was in the frame.
Yeah. So this is one of my favorites. And this is, it's got your reflection there too. Keep it simple, make it powerful. And this is actually an original. This is Sharpie marker onto paper. And as I first started, that was it. I would draw, like everything is Sharpie. I'd take a picture and I'd share it. But remember back in 2015 when I was confused and I knew I wanted to build my brand. So I had to not only get an old URL to recapture my Twitter handle with 200 followers, but I was on some of them, but never really on there. So I was like, what the hell am I going to do on social media? And if you're starting, you're like, I don't know what to share. Somebody had bought me a ticket to Tony Robbins, his Unleash Your Power Within, like the UPW event. I'd never been to the event. I show up, it was 3 days of craziness. I walked on coals. And one of the things that he said that stuck out is he said, if all else fails, do two things. Do one thing every single day that you can do. It's not too hard, but one thing you can do every day and just commit to do it. The other thing is I want you to have a big goal, like a 3 to 5 year goal, something that you chip away at, but it's going to take you 3 to 5 years to do. And so I thought to myself, and I've always had a passion for art and drawing, I said, I can draw stick figures. Maybe I'll draw a stick figure every day. So my first post on Instagram is me doing a karate jump over the firewalker thing saying, I now know why I'm on Instagram. I'm going to share stick figures. And that was years ago. And I've drawn thousands of them. And it's just such a fun way to translate what is a complex concept into something as simple as black and white. So that was my daily goal. The long-term goal was writing a book. And it was really for the 313 at the time, and through the 313 is in here. So with that simple advice, I share that all the time. Just find something to do every day and find something that will take you 2 or 3 years to do and just keep chipping away at it. Because Dan, successful blank, right? So successful people, successful podcasters, successful whatever, successful people are not doing what everyone else cannot do. Successful people are doing what everyone can do, but not everyone does. Everybody can draw something every day. Everybody can do something every day. It's not a hack, but people are looking for these hacks. So if I could share with you one thing, just do the work every day and stop looking for the hacks. And we now have a little bit more time on some of our hands, although I'm busier than ever right now. But what are those small things that you can do? And then share that process and ditch the act along the way. Bring people with your journey. They'll get to know you. And now people know me for my stick figures. But it doesn't just happen overnight.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Ryan Foland, communications manager at University of California at Irvine, act ditcher, keynote speaker, one of my favorite gingers on the planet. An all-around great guy. You can find him at Ryan Foland. Also, obviously, if you're watching this on LinkedIn Live, you can find him on LinkedIn, Instagram, everywhere. Thank you so much, Ryan, for joining us. And next week, we're going to have John DeJulius, the president of the DeJulius Company, customer service guru. I think we'll have to see if he takes issue with the Godfather for Shep Hyken, because that would mean he would be, I don't know what he's going to do. We'll have to figure out, Jedi Master or something like that. But we'll have John DeJulius next week. Thank you so much for joining me on The Experience Maker. Really appreciate you tuning in. And we'll see you next week, Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Take care, everybody.